I walked into my parents' house after my shift to find all my belongings thrown across the front. My name is Bianca. I am 24 years old, and I never thought I would come home after a 12-hour night shift as an ER nurse to find my entire life scattered across the front lawn. Clothes, books, even my nursing diploma thrown carelessly like garbage. In an instant, the place I had called home for my entire life became just a house, a structure holding people who decided I was no longer welcome. Can you imagine the feeling of seeing your whole life tossed outside the place you called home? Before I share this story with you, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you want to know how I turned this heartbreaking betrayal into the freedom I never knew I needed. The fluorescent lights of Memorial Hospital always made everyone look sickly, but after 12 hours under them, I looked like I belonged in one of the beds instead of caring for the patients in them. Working in the emergency room was never easy, but I loved it. There was something deeply satisfying about being there for people on what might be the worst day of their lives. The adrenaline rush when a critical case came through those sliding doors, the teamwork that kicked in automatically, and the profound relief when we stabilized someone who arrived barely clinging to life. That night had been particularly brutal. 3 car accident victims, a child with a severe asthma attack, and an elderly man having a stroke all within 2 hours. By the end of my shift, my scrubs had various unidentifiable stains. My feet throbbed in protest, and my brain felt like it was swimming through molasses. But I had helped save lives, and that knowledge always carried me home with a sense of purpose. Home. The word used to bring comfort, but lately it only brought anxiety. I had been living with my parents, Walter and Diane, since graduating nursing school 2 years ago. Initially, it seemed practical to save money while paying down student loans. What I did not anticipate was how different it would be returning as an adult to my childhood bedroom. The night I pulled into our driveway after that exhausting shift, I had no idea it would be the last time I would think of that house as home. But the signs had been building for months. My father, Walter, a successful insurance executive, had always been controlling, but it seemed to intensify once I started my nursing career. He had wanted me to go to medical school. "Bianca, you are too smart to just be a nurse," he would say dismissively, as though my chosen profession was somehow beneath me, beneath him. My mother, Diane, a high school principal, was more subtle but equally intrusive. She had mastered the art of criticism disguised as concern. "Sweetheart, I went through your closet and reorganized everything. Those scrubs were so carelessly thrown in there," she would say, never acknowledging that she had gone through my personal belongings without permission. The invasion of privacy had become relentless. My phone would mysteriously move from where I had left it, and sometimes I would catch my mother scrolling through it. My bank statements, which came to our house, had clearly been opened and resealed. My father had installed a location tracking app on my phone for safety and questioned me if I deviated from my usual routes. "Why were you at that coffee shop for 2 hours yesterday?" he would demand. "Were you with that musician again?" That musician was Thomas, my boyfriend of 6 months. He played guitar at a local jazz club 4 nights a week and taught music at an after-school program during the day. He was kind, respectful, and passionate about music education. My parents hated him on principle. He was not the doctor or lawyer they had envisioned for me. "Musicians do not have stable careers, Bianca," my father would lecture. "You need someone who can provide security." The irony that I was building my own career and could provide for myself seemed lost on him. The tension had been escalating for weeks. I had been secretly looking at apartments knowing I needed to escape the suffocating atmosphere of my parents' house. I had even signed a lease application for a small one-bedroom near the hospital, though I hadn't told anyone but Thomas. The final argument happened just before I left for my shift. I had planned a weekend trip with Thomas to see one of his favorite bands perform in Chicago. It would be our first trip together, and I was looking forward to the freedom of being away from my parents' watchful eyes. I had requested the time off from work weeks ago, but had deliberately not mentioned it to my parents until the day before. "A weekend away with him? Absolutely not," my father had thundered when I finally told them. "You live under our roof, you follow our rules." "Dad, I am 24 years old. I am not asking for permission. I am informing you that I will be away for the weekend." I had responded, my voice shaking slightly but determined. My mother's eyes had narrowed. This is the thanks we get for supporting you, for giving you a place to live rent-free. I pay rent, I reminded her. The amount they charged me was below market rate, true, but I did contribute financially to the household. Not enough to buy independence from this family, my father had shot back. The argument had escalated until I had to leave for work or risk being late. I had stormed out saying we would discuss it when I got home. Little did I know what kind of discussion they had in mind. The hospital parking lot was nearly empty when I clocked out at 7:30 a.m. The morning shift had already taken over, and I had given my report to Megan, the day nurse who would be handling my patients. My body was moving on autopilot as I walked to my car, the mental fog of exhaustion making everything seem slightly surreal. As I slid into the driver's seat, I finally checked my phone, which had been in my locker during my shift. 5 missed calls and multiple texts from Thomas. That was unusual. Thomas knew my work schedule and rarely contacted me during shifts, unless it was important. The most recent text made my stomach drop. Bianca, your parents just called me. They found out about the apartment application. Something is very wrong. Call me as soon as you can. I tried calling him immediately, but the call went to voicemail. It was early, and he might still be sleeping after his late-night gig at the jazz club. A sense of unease settled over me as I drove home, my tired mind racing with possibilities. How had they found out about the apartment I had been so careful using my work address for all the paperwork? The spring morning was beautiful, deceptively peaceful with birds chirping and flowers blooming in neighborhood gardens. As I turned onto my street, the sunlight caught something unusual on our front lawn. At first, my exhausted brain could not process what I was seeing. Splashes of color scattered across the normally pristine grass. As I got closer, the colors took shape, becoming recognizable objects. Clothes, books, shoes, my belongings. I slammed on the brakes, stopping awkwardly half in the driveway. Stumbling out of the car, I ran toward the lawn, my body moving before my mind had fully comprehended what I was seeing. Everything I owned had been thrown haphazardly across the grass. Clothes spilled from torn garbage bags, books lay splayed open with their spines cracked, and photo frames had been smashed, the glass glittering dangerously in the morning sun. My nursing textbooks, which had cost hundreds of dollars and contained all my careful notes, were soaked from the morning dew. My scrubs, still in their neat folded piles from the laundry, were now strewn across the damp grass. Family photos, jewelry boxes, even my toiletries were scattered everywhere. What is going on? I whispered to myself, shock making it hard to breathe. I spotted something that made my heart sink further, a small wooden box that had belonged to my grandmother. It contained the only jewelry she had left me when she passed away, a simple pearl necklace she had worn at her wedding. The box had been thrown with such force that it had broken open, and I couldn't see the necklace anywhere. In a daze, I walked toward the front door keys clutched in my trembling hand. Before I could use them, the door swung open. My father stood there, his face set in lines of cold fury that I had never seen before. Dad, what happened? Why are my things outside? I asked, my voice small and confused. You know exactly what happened, he said, his voice eerily calm. We found your apartment application. We know you were planning to leave. And we found your diary. We know about your weekend plans with that musician. My mind reeled at the invasion of privacy. My diary had been hidden in a locked drawer. They must have gone through all my belongings while I was at work. You went through my things. You read my private diary, I asked, anger beginning to cut through the shock. My mother appeared beside him, her arms crossed. We had every right. You are living a double life, Bianca. Lying to us, planning to abandon your family, throwing away your potential on that worthless musician. Thomas is not worthless, I defended automatically. And I wasn't abandoning anyone. I am an adult who wants her own place. Not while taking our support, my father countered. If you want to make adult decisions, you can do it without our help, without our home. The reality of the situation began to sink in. So you threw all my things on the lawn. Everything I own. You have a choice, my father said as if he were offering a reasonable business proposition. You can recommit to this family, break up with that boy, forget this apartment nonsense, and continue your education toward medical school as we have always planned. Or you can leave and never come back. I stood there, still in my scrubs after a 12-hour shift saving lives, being given an ultimatum about my own life. Behind my parents, I could see my younger sister Natalie hovering in the hallway, her face pale and eyes wide. She said nothing did nothing to defend me. I need to gather my things, I said, finally attempting to step inside. My father blocked the doorway. The things on the lawn are what you get. Your keys no longer work. We changed the locks this morning. Make your choice, Bianca. As if on cue, the sky darkened and fat raindrops began to fall. I watched in horror as water began to seep into my books, my clothes, my entire life. How could you do this? I asked, tears mixing with the rain on my face. How could you betray this family? My mother countered. I stood there, the rain increasing in intensity, soaking through my scrubs. The choice was clear. It wasn't a choice at all. I guess I'm leaving then, I said, my voice breaking. My father nodded once sharply, then closed the door in my face. I heard the deadbolt click, a sound that seemed to echo with finality. I turned back to the rain-soaked disaster that was my life and began frantically gathering what I could save. My diploma, which I had been so proud of, lay in a puddle, the ink already beginning to run. Photo albums from my childhood were swelling with moisture, the memories literally dissolving before my eyes. I found my grandmother's pearl necklace half buried in the mud, the delicate strand broken. Standing there in the pouring rain, I realized that the home I had known all my life had never truly been mine. It had been a gilded cage, and I was just now seeing the bars. I sat in my car soaking wet and shivering, though not entirely from the cold. The rain hammered against the windshield, creating a cocoon of white noise that matched the static in my brain. Shock had settled into my bones, making it hard to think, hard to process what had just happened. I had just been thrown out of my home, my belongings destroyed, my family turned against me in the span of a single night shift. Through the blur of rain, I stared at the house where I had grown up. Every birthday, every Christmas, every moment of my life had happened behind those walls. The bay window where I used to curl up with books during rainstorms, very much like this one. The oak tree I had fallen from at age 9, breaking my arm, which had actually sparked my initial interest in medicine, when a kind ER nurse had explained the X-ray to me. How could the same people who had rushed me to the hospital that day, who had held my hand through vaccinations and nightmares, who had celebrated my graduation just 2 years ago, now throw me out like garbage? The disconnect was impossible to reconcile. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and called Thomas. This time he answered on the first ring. Bianca, are you okay? I have been trying to reach you all night. They threw me out, I said, my voice cracking. All my stuff is on the lawn and they changed the locks. Thomas, everything is ruined. Where are you now? The sleep was gone from his voice, replaced with alarm. In my car in front of the house. I don't know what to do. A sob escaped me, the first of many. Everything is soaked. My photos, my books, all of it. Stay there. I'm coming right now, he said. Do not leave. I will be there in 15 minutes. True to his word, Thomas's old Honda pulled up behind my car exactly 15 minutes later. He didn't even bother with an umbrella, rushing through the rain to my car. When I opened the door, he enveloped me in a hug, not caring that I was completely soaked. I am so sorry, Bianca, he whispered into my wet hair. We will figure this out, I promise. Together, we salvaged what we could from the lawn. Thomas found some plastic storage bins in his car that we used for the items that weren't completely ruined. My clothes were mostly salvageable, though soaked. Books and papers were in worse shape, many beyond saving. Thomas carefully collected the pieces of my grandmother's necklace, promising we would get it restrung. What struck me most was how gentle Thomas was with my family photos. Even as anger flashed in his eyes at what my parents had done, he carefully dried each one he could save, not saying a word about the people in them who had just caused me so much pain. Let's get this all to my place, he said when we had gathered everything we could. You can shower and rest. You've been up all night, and this is a nightmare, I finished for him. Yes, a nightmare. He squeezed my hand. But you're not alone in it. Thomas lived in a small apartment above the music store where he taught lessons. It was tiny, but warm and filled with books and instruments. His roommate, a fellow musician named Jackson, was still asleep when we arrived, but Thomas assured me it would be fine for me to stay. After a hot shower and changing into dry clothes, Thomas had managed to salvage the physical exhaustion of my night shift, combined with the emotional trauma hit me like a freight train. I collapsed onto Thomas's bed, my mind still racing despite my body's demand for sleep. "What am I going to do?" I asked, as Thomas brought me a cup of tea. "Where am I going to live? All my important documents were in that house. My birth certificate, my social security card, everything." "We will figure it out step by step," Thomas promised. "But first, you need to sleep. You've been up for over 24 hours and you're in shock." He was right, but sleep seemed impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my possessions scattered across the lawn, dissolving in the rain. I saw my father's cold eyes as he closed the door in my face. I heard my mother's accusation, "How could you betray this family?" When I finally did drift into an uneasy sleep, nightmares chased me. I dreamt I was locked outside in a storm, pounding on doors that no one would open, while important pieces of myself washed away in a rising flood. I woke with a gasp several hours later, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar ceiling, the sound of a guitar being gently strummed nearby. Then reality crashed back, and with it came a fresh wave of grief. Thomas must have heard me stir because the music stopped and he appeared in the doorway. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Like my life just imploded." I answered honestly. He nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Jackson and I sorted through some of your things while you were sleeping. Most of your clothes will be fine once they're dry. We have them hanging in the bathroom and kitchen." "Thank you," I said, the simple kindness bringing fresh tears to my eyes. "There's something else you should see," he said, his expression troubled. "Some of your things weren't just thrown out. They were deliberately damaged." He handed me my nursing diploma. It hadn't just been soaked by rain, the diploma had been deliberately torn nearly in half before being discarded. Next came a photo album. The pictures of me with my hospital colleagues had been defaced with my face scratched out in several photos. "Why would they do this?" I whispered, tracing the torn edge of my diploma, the achievement I had worked so hard for. "They wanted to hurt you," Thomas said simply. "This wasn't just kicking you out. This was punishment." The realization settled like ice in my stomach. This hadn't been a heat-of-the-moment decision. My parents hadn't just thrown my things out in anger. They had taken the time to go through my possessions and systematically damage the items that represented my independence, my chosen path, my life outside their control. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought it might be my parents coming to their senses apologizing. Instead, it was my grandmother, my father's mother. "Bianca, what did you do?" she demanded without preamble. "Your father is absolutely beside himself." "Grandma, they threw all my possessions onto the front lawn. In the rain, they changed the locks. They destroyed my diploma," I said, still struggling to believe it myself. "Well, you must have done something to provoke them," she replied. "Your parents only want what's best for you. You should apologize and come home." "Apologize for what?" "For wanting to have my own apartment at 24, for having a boyfriend they don't approve of, for choosing nursing instead of medical school." "For being ungrateful," she said firmly. "After everything they've done for you. Listen to me, Bianca. Family is all we have in this world. Don't throw it away over some boyfriend or apartment." The call left me shaking with anger and disbelief. Not only had my parents disowned me, but they had turned my grandmother against me too. I wondered briefly about Natalie, my sister. She had watched it all happen and said nothing. Not a text, not a call, nothing. "Everyone is taking their side," I said to Thomas after I hung up. "My entire family is acting like I did something wrong by wanting to live my own life." He took my hand. "Not everyone is against you. I'm here. And once we get you settled, you'll see there are others who will support you too." I wanted to believe him, but in that moment, it felt like my entire support system had been ripped away, leaving me adrift in a storm with only Thomas as an anchor. The next morning, I had to go back to work for another night shift. After a full 24 hours of being homeless, shocked, and heartbroken, I had to put on a professional face and care for patients. I had managed to salvage 3 sets of scrubs, though they were still slightly damp. I wore the driest pair, hoping they wouldn't smell of mildew under the hospital lights. "You can call in sick," Thomas had suggested. "They would understand." But I couldn't. As strange as it seemed, the hospital was now the only place where I knew my role, where I felt competent and in control. And frankly, I needed the money more than ever, so I went moving through the motions like a ghost. For the first few hours, I managed to compartmentalize to focus solely on each patient in front of me. Mrs. Rodriguez with her gallstones, the teenage boy with a skateboarding injury, the elderly man with pneumonia. I checked vitals, administered medications, and updated charts with mechanical precision. Then came the quiet period around 3 a.m., when the emergency room briefly emptied, except for the patients already admitted and waiting for beds upstairs. I went to the break room to eat something, and suddenly found myself unable to hold back the tears any longer. They came in silent streams at first, then in gulping sobs that I couldn't control. That was how Megan, the day nurse who had become a work friend, found me. She had come in early to pick up extra hours and walked into the break room to find me having a complete breakdown over a half-eaten yogurt. "Bianca, what's wrong? Did we lose a patient?" she asked immediately at my side. I shook my head, unable to speak through the sobs. When I finally caught my breath, the whole story spilled out: my controlling parents, the apartment application they had discovered, the horror of finding all my possessions on the lawn, the locked doors, the deliberately damaged mementos. Megan listened, her expression growing increasingly horrified. "Where are you staying now?" she asked when I finished. "With my boyfriend," I said. "But it's temporary. He has a roommate and there's barely room for the two of them, let alone me and all my salvaged stuff." "So you need a place to stay," she said, thinking. "And you need to figure out your documents, your finances, all of that." I nodded miserably. "I don't even know where to start. I've never been on my own like this. Not really." "Well, I have good news and bad news," Megan said. "The good news is that you're not alone. The bad news is that your parents are even more toxic than you realized." After my shift, Megan insisted I come to her apartment for breakfast. "You need real food and a real plan," she said. "And my roommate just moved out, so I have space if you need it." At Megan's apartment, I began the painful process of taking inventory of what remained of my life. My laptop had thankfully been in my work backpack, which I had taken to the hospital. My phone was intact, but nearly everything else had suffered damage to some degree. Even worse were the discoveries about my finances. My parents and I had a joint bank account, a remnant from my college days, that I had never changed. When I checked the balance, I discovered they had withdrawn nearly all the money, leaving just $137.42. "They took my money," I said, staring at the banking app in disbelief. "Can they legally do that?" Megan asked, looking over my shoulder. "It's a joint account, so yes, technically they can." The sense of violation deepened. It wasn't just my home and possessions they had taken, but my financial security as well. The hits kept coming. My phone suddenly stopped working mid-call. When I tried to restart it, a message appeared: "This device has been removed from the family plan." My parents had canceled my cell service, and perhaps most alarmingly, when I tried to check my credit report to see what accounts were in my name, I discovered several credit cards I had never applied for, all maxed out. They had apparently used my social security number to open accounts in my name years ago. "This is identity theft," Megan said, her voice hard with anger. "Even if they're your parents, this is illegal." I sat on Megan's couch, surrounded by the soggy remains of my possessions, and felt a despair so profound it was physically painful. I had lost my home, my family, my financial security, and even my good credit, all in the span of 48 hours. The urge to curl into a ball and give up was overwhelming. "I can't do this," I whispered. "I can't rebuild from nothing. Maybe I should just apologize, go back, follow their rules, until I can get properly on my feet." "No," Megan said firmly. "That's the shock talking. They've shown you exactly who they are. Going back would just put you under their control again. And next time they decide to pull the rug out from under, you might be even worse." That night, unable to sleep on Megan's couch, I hit the lowest point. The adrenaline had worn off, the shock had faded, and raw grief took its place. I sobbed silently into a borrowed pillow, mourning not just the loss of my possessions, but the family I thought I had. The parents who I believed, despite their flaws, loved me unconditionally, the security I had taken for granted. In those dark hours, I wondered if I would ever feel whole again, if this shattered version of myself could possibly rebuild a life worth living. The answer came from an unexpected source. My next shift, I was assigned to care for an elderly woman named Rose, admitted after a fall in her home. She was 78, with no emergency contacts listed in her chart. As I checked her vitals, she studied me with shrewd blue eyes. "You're carrying a heavy burden, dear," she said suddenly. "I can see it in your eyes." Something about her kind gaze broke through my professional veneer. "I'm fine," I said automatically, then amended, "Actually, no. I'm not fine, but I will be." "Want to trade stories?" she asked. "Mine's pretty good. My son and his wife decided I was too much trouble and dropped me at a nursing home without telling me. Just said we were going out for lunch, then left me there with a suitcase they'd packed without my knowledge." I stared at her, recognizing a fellow survivor of family betrayal. "My parents threw all my belongings on the lawn and changed the locks because I wanted to get my own apartment," I admitted. Rose nodded sagely. "Ah, the old 'if I can't control you, I'll destroy you' approach. I know it well." For the next hour, as I completed my rounds and returned to check on her, Rose told me her story. How after her abandonment at 58, she had rebuilt her life, made new friends, found a seniors apartment complex, even started a small business selling handmade quilts online with the help of a neighbor's teenage son. "The worst day of your life can become the first day of your real life," she told me, patting my hand. "The family that matters is the one you choose, not necessarily the one you were born into." Her words settled into my heart, planting a seed of possibility. If Rose could rebuild at 58, surely I could do it at 24. "How did you do it?" I asked her. "How did you start over when it hurt so much?" "One tiny step at a time," she said. "First, I secured a safe place to sleep. Then I protected whatever money I had left. Next, I found one person who believed in me, then another. I celebrated tiny victories. And most importantly, I decided that I deserved better than people who would throw me away." As I left her room, something had shifted in me. The grief was still there, the pain still raw, but alongside it grew a tiny flame of determination. I would rebuild. I would create a life they couldn't take away. And maybe, just maybe, this violent uprooting would allow me to grow in ways I never could have under their shadow. I was more than what they had tried to reduce me to. I was a nurse who saved lives. I was a woman capable of love and being loved. I was Bianca, with or without their approval, with or without their roof over my head. The belongings strewn across that rain-soaked lawn weren't my life. They were just things. My life was still mine to shape, and for the first time truly mine alone. Finding a place to live became my first priority. With my credit destroyed and minimal savings, my options were severely limited. For 2 weeks, I alternated between Thomas's couch and Megan's spare room, reluctant to overstay my welcome in either place, but grateful for their generosity. The apartment hunt was discouraging. Everything in my price range was either dangerously run down or so far from the hospital that the commute would be impossible without a car. I was beginning to lose hope when Megan mentioned that a studio apartment in her building had just become available. "It's tiny," she warned, "like really tiny, but the landlord is my friend, and I can vouch for you despite the credit issues." The studio was indeed minuscule, barely 300 square feet with a kitchenette along one wall, a bathroom so small you could brush your teeth while showering, and a main room that would serve as living room, bedroom, and dining room. But it was clean, safe, and just 6 blocks from the hospital. "I'll take it," I said immediately, not even bothering to negotiate the rent. Having my own space, a door I could lock, a place where no one could throw me out on a whim, seemed like the greatest luxury imaginable. Signing that lease was the first moment I felt like I might survive this ordeal. The key in my hand represented more than access to a tiny apartment. It was the key to my independence, my future, my freedom from control. Furnishing the apartment presented its own challenges. I had no bed, no couch, no table, nothing but the clothes and personal items we had salvaged from the rain. But here, too, unexpected support emerged. When Megan mentioned my situation to other nurses at the hospital, donations began to appear. Lisa from pediatrics had an extra dresser. Juan from radiology was upgrading his couch and offered his old one. Dr. Patterson, who had mentored me during my training, showed up with a gift card to a home goods store for whatever you need. Even patients contributed. Rose, the elderly woman who had shared her story of starting over, had been discharged but returned to the hospital a week later with a hand-stitched quilt for my new bed. "Something beautiful for your fresh start," she said, pressing it into my hands. Thomas spent his days off helping me move in, arranging furniture, hanging curtains, transforming the tiny space into something that felt like home. His presence was a constant comfort, his unwavering support, a revelation. Unlike my parents, he encouraged my independence while still being there when I needed him. "What do you think?" he asked as we stood in the middle of my newly assembled apartment. I looked around at the mismatched furniture, the donated dishes, the single plant on the windowsill that Thomas had bought to make it official. It was nothing like the comfortable upper-middle-class home I had grown up in, but it was mine. "I think it's perfect," I said, and meant it. The practical challenges of rebuilding my life extended far beyond finding housing. I had to open a new bank account with just the $137 I had left. I had to get a new phone plan using a prepaid option until I could afford something better. I had to report the identity theft and begin the long process of repairing my credit. And I had to replace my essential documents, birth certificate, social security card, nursing license copy, all of which had been left behind in my parents' house. Each step was a mixture of bureaucratic frustration and small victory. The day I received my new social security card in the mail, I actually cried with relief. It was one more piece of myself reclaimed, one more link to my parents severed. The financial strain was intense. Even with picking up extra shifts at the hospital, I was barely making ends meet. My new rent consumed nearly half my income, and the deposits for utilities had drained what little savings I had left. I ate a lot of ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches those first months. But there were unexpected blessings, too. My neighbor across the hall, an elderly woman named Mrs. Williams, began inviting me for dinner once a week. "You remind me of my granddaughter," she said, serving homemade lasagna. "And you're too skinny. Nurses need their strength." Thomas brought me leftovers from the restaurant where he played carefully packed by the chef who had heard my story. His parents, whom I had only met once before, sent a care package with homemade cookies and a gift card for groceries. Even Jackson Thomas's roommate, who had initially seemed annoyed by my sudden presence in their apartment, showed up one day with a desk he had found at a garage sale. "Thought you could use it for studying," he said awkwardly. "Thomas mentioned you want to get your advanced certification eventually." The kindness of others both humbled and strengthened me. Each gesture, no matter how small, reinforced what Rose had told me, that the family that matters is the one you choose. In the midst of all this practical rebuilding, Thomas and I grew closer. He had seen me at my absolute lowest, crying in soggy scrubs as we salvaged what we could from my parents' lawn. He had held me through nightmares, helped me navigate bureaucracy, and never once made me feel like a burden. One evening, as we sat on my donated couch eating takeout after I had successfully negotiated a payment plan for the fraudulent credit card debt, Thomas took my hand. "I am so proud of you," he said. "I don't think you realize how strong you are." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "But you are holding it together. You lost everything, and instead of breaking, you're rebuilding. That's real strength." His words were like a mirror reflecting back a version of myself I hadn't been able to see, a resilient woman who could face adversity and keep going. Perhaps that was the greatest gift in all of this trauma, the discovery of my own capacity to survive. Slowly, over those first months of independence, I began to heal. The nightmares became less frequent. The constant knot of anxiety in my chest began to loosen. I started to feel at home in my tiny apartment with its mismatched furniture and hand-me-down dishes. And most importantly, I began to feel at home in myself in this new identity as someone who had been tested by fire and emerged intact. 6 months into my new life, an unexpected encounter forced me to confront the past I had been trying to process. My younger sister Natalie called me out of the blue. "Bianca, please don't hang up," she said when I answered. I hadn't heard from her since the day our parents had thrown me out. She had stood in the hallway watching it happen, saying nothing. "What do you want, Natalie?" I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "To apologize," she said, her voice small. "I should have done something that day. Said something. Helped you. I was a coward. And I'm so sorry." The apology unlocked emotions I had been suppressing. "Why didn't you?" I asked, the words coming out more sharply than I intended. "You just watched. You didn't even text me afterward to see if I was okay." "I was scared," she admitted. "After you left, Dad went through my phone, my computer, everything. He made me block your number. He said if he caught me talking to you, I'd be next. I only just got a secret phone they don't know about." The revelation was both disturbing and sadly unsurprising. "So nothing's changed there," I said. "It's worse," Natalie said. "They're completely obsessed with you betraying the family. They talk about it all the time, how ungrateful you are, how you chose that musician over your family. Mom cries about it for sympathy, and Dad uses it as a threat when I don't do exactly what he wants." I felt a chill. The picture Natalie painted was of a family dynamic even more toxic than I had realized. "Are you okay?" I asked, suddenly, worried for my sister, who was still living in that environment. "I'm surviving," she said. "I'm applying to colleges as far away as possible. I have a secret savings account they don't know about." "Smart," I said, a flicker of pride cutting through my anger. "You always were the clever one." "I learned from watching you," she said. "Even before everything, you were always pushing for independence in small ways." I paid attention. We talked for nearly an hour, catching up on the months of silence. I told her about my apartment, my struggles, and my small victories. She told me about the increasing control at home and her plans to escape. "Can we meet sometime?" she asked as the call wound down. "I miss you." The request gave me pause. I had been working so hard to move forward, to build a life separate from my family's toxicity. Did I really want to open that door again? But Natalie wasn't responsible for our parents' actions. She was just another victim of their control. "Yes," I said finally. "But we have to be careful. I can't risk them finding out where I live or work." 2 days later, we met at a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and our parents' house. Seeing Natalie in person was harder than I expected, a living reminder of the family I had lost, the home that had been taken from me. She looked thinner, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of stress beyond normal teenage concerns. When she hugged me, she held on a beat too long, like someone clinging to a lifeline. "I brought something for you," she said when we sat down. From her backpack, she produced a small bundle wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was my mother's silver locket, the one with photos of Natalie and me as children. "I took it from Mom's jewelry box. You always loved it, and I thought you should have something from before." The gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a connection to the good parts of my childhood, an acknowledgement that not everything from before had been tainted. Our careful reconciliation was the first crack in the wall I had built between my past and present. But a more dramatic confrontation was just around the corner. 2 weeks after meeting with Natalie, I was working the ER when a familiar name appeared on the admission list: Walter Jackson, my father. "I can switch patients with you," Megan offered immediately when she saw my face. I almost accepted. The thought of facing my father, of having to maintain professional composure while treating the man who had destroyed my life, seemed impossible. But something in me rebelled against hiding. "No," I said. "I can handle it." My father had been admitted with chest pains, a potential heart attack that turned out to be a mild cardiac episode exacerbated by stress. When I walked into his curtained area, his eyes widened in shock. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I work here," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I'm one of the nurses assigned to this section today. Before he could respond, my mother rushed in, returning from the cafeteria with a cup of coffee. She stopped short when she saw me. "We want a different nurse," she said immediately. "That's your right," I replied, still maintaining my professional tone. "I'll have someone else assigned to you immediately." As I turned to leave, my father spoke again. "You look terrible. That apartment must not be working out too well for you." The comment was designed to hurt, to reinforce that I had made the wrong choice. 6 months ago, it would have cut deep. Now it merely bounced off the armor I had developed. "Actually, I'm doing quite well," I said. "I hope you feel better soon, Mr. Jackson." The encounter shook me more than I wanted to admit. Seeing them so unexpectedly in my workplace where I had felt safe was jarring, but it also showed me how far I had come. I had faced them without falling apart, without giving them the power to destroy my hard-won peace. What I didn't anticipate was how they would escalate the situation. The next day, my nursing supervisor called me into her office. "Bianca, I've received a concerning complaint about you," she said, looking uncomfortable. "A patient claims you were unprofessional and hostile." I didn't need to ask which patient. "I can explain," I began, and told her the abbreviated version of my history with my parents. She listened attentively, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "I see," she said when I finished. "Well, that explains why they also mentioned knowing someone on the hospital board, and suggested your position here might need reconsideration." Cold fear gripped me. They were trying to take my job now, too. "Can they do that?" I asked. "Not successfully," my supervisor assured me. "Your work record is excellent, and we have protocols for conflicts of interest. I've already reassigned them to another nurse and noted in their file that you have a personal relationship that precludes you from treating them. But Bianca, I'm concerned about you. This level of family conflict can take a real toll." Her concern was touching another reminder that I had built a support network separate from my family. "I'm working through it," I assured her, "and I appreciate your understanding." The incident at the hospital wasn't the end of my parents' attempts to reassert control. Somehow they discovered my new address, possibly through a mutual acquaintance, or by following Natalie after one of our secret meetings. One evening I returned home from a shift to find them waiting outside my building. For a moment, seeing them in this context, my new life, my independent space felt like a collision of worlds that should have remained separate. "What are you doing here?" I asked, too surprised to mask my discomfort. "We need to talk," my father said. "This has gone on long enough." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, moving toward the building entrance. "Bianca, please," my mother said, blocking my path. "We're still your parents. We love you." The words which once would have weakened my resolve now rang hollow. Love doesn't throw someone's possessions onto the lawn. Love doesn't try to get someone fired. Love doesn't control and manipulate. "We made a mistake," my father admitted, though his tone lacked genuine remorse. "We reacted poorly. But you pushed us to it with your secretiveness, your disobedience." "My independence," I corrected. "My right to live my own life at 24. "Come home," my mother pleaded. "We can work this out. Your room is waiting for you." For a brief, wavering moment, I imagined it returning to the comfort and security of my old life. No more financial struggles, no more tiny apartment, no more starting from scratch. But at what cost? "No," I said firmly. "I'm not coming back. This is my home now." "Because of him," my father demanded. "That musician who will never amount to anything, because of me," I clarified. "Because I deserve to make my own choices, good or bad. Because I'm an adult, not a child for you to control." "If you don't come home with us now," my father said, his voice hardening, "don't expect to be welcome later. When this independent phase fails, when you realize what you've thrown away, our door will be closed." It was the same ultimatum as before, repackaged as a final chance. But this time I wasn't a shocked, rain-soaked girl standing among the ruins of her life. I was a woman who had rebuilt from those ruins, who had discovered her own strength. "I'm not the one who threw anything away," I said quietly. "You did the day you decided controlling me was more important than loving me. Now please leave before I call the police." My hands shook as I unlocked the door to my building, but my voice had remained steady. As I closed the door behind me, I caught a glimpse of their faces, shock, mixed with the dawning realization that their power over me was truly gone. That night, I called Thomas and told him what had happened. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Standing up to them couldn't have been easy." Actually, it was, I realized, easier than I expected, because I finally understood something they never did. I don't need their approval to be whole. In that moment, standing in my tiny kitchen phone pressed to my ear, I felt something shift inside me. The last lingering hope that my parents would change, would suddenly become the supportive family I had always wanted, faded away. It was a loss, but also a liberation. I was free to build my life without the weight of their expectations, without the constant reaching for an approval that would never come. I had faced my past and chosen my future. And for the first time since that rainy morning when my world had collapsed, I felt truly, completely free. 1 year after finding my belongings scattered across my parents' lawn, I threw a small party in my apartment. It wasn't a traditional celebration by any means. I was commemorating the anniversary of the worst day of my life, which had ultimately led to the best year of my life. My tiny studio had transformed over the months. The mismatched donated furniture had been gradually replaced with pieces I had carefully saved for and chosen myself. Photos of my new family covered the walls, Megan and her boyfriend Thomas performing at the jazz club, Mrs. Williams and me at her birthday dinner. A group shot of the nursing team after we had handled a major car accident with no casualties. Conspicuously absent were any photos of my parents or childhood home. Those memories remained, but they no longer defined my walls or my life. "To freedom," Thomas toasted, raising a plastic cup of cheap champagne. "And to Bianca, the strongest person I know." "To chosen family," Megan added, "the ones who show up." The room was crowded with people who had supported me through the past year. Jackson Thomas's roommate, who had helped me move countless times. Dr. Patterson, who had recommended me for the advanced nursing certification program I would be starting next month. Mrs. Williams, who still insisted on feeding me weekly, despite my protests that I could now afford groceries. Even Natalie, who had graduated high school and was heading to college in another state, finally escaping our parents' control. "To all of you," I said, my heart full. "I wouldn't be here without you." The relationship with my parents remained fractured. After their appearance at my apartment, I had made it clear through a formal letter sent on the advice of the lawyer Megan's brother had introduced me to, that further contact would be considered harassment. They had respected this boundary, though I occasionally heard updates through Natalie. My father had had another more serious heart episode. My mother had joined a church group for parents of wayward children. They had told extended family that I was going through a phase and would eventually come to my senses. I had come to accept that they might never understand or respect my choices. And more importantly, I had come to accept that their understanding wasn't necessary for my happiness. My relationship with Thomas had deepened through the challenges. He had seen me at my absolute worst and loved me anyway. He had supported my independence without trying to control me, a refreshing contrast to my upbringing. As the party wound down and we cleaned up the small apartment, Thomas pulled me onto the tiny balcony that was one of my apartment's few luxuries. The night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights, a warm spring breeze carrying the scent of new possibilities. "I have something for you," he said, suddenly looking nervous. "It's not exactly a traditional anniversary gift." From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. My heart stuttered. "Before you panic," he said quickly, noting my wide eyes. "This isn't pressure, it's a promise." Inside the box was a delicate silver ring with a small sapphire. Not a diamond, not an engagement ring, but something equally meaningful. "It's a promise that I will always respect your independence," he said. "That I will never try to control you or make you feel less than. That I understand your journey and want to walk alongside you, not direct your path." Tears filled my eyes, but they were tears of joy, of recognition. In this moment on this anniversary of trauma, Thomas was acknowledging both how far I had come and the scars I still carried. "It's perfect," I whispered, letting him slide it onto my right hand. "Thank you for understanding." Later that night, after everyone had left, and Thomas had gone home to give me the space he knew I sometimes needed, I stood on my balcony alone. The tiny apartment behind me represented everything I had built from nothing. The ring on my finger symbolized a future relationship built on respect rather than control. The certification program acceptance letter on my desk promised professional growth on my own terms. 1 year ago, I had stood in the rain watching my life dissolve. Tonight, I stood under stars surrounded by a life I had created for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. "Happy Independence Day, sis. So proud of you." I smiled, typing back, "Freedom looks good on both of us." From beyond my balcony, the city hummed with life and possibility. I no longer thought of my parents' house when someone mentioned home. Home was this space I had created. Home was the people who had chosen to stand by me. Home was the freedom to make my own choices, my own mistakes, my own triumphs. "I don't call it home anymore," I whispered to the night sky. "I call it freedom." What would you do if the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally tried to control every aspect of your life? Would you have the courage to start over from scratch? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please hit that subscribe button so we can build this supportive community together. Remember, sometimes the family that matters most is the one you create for yourself. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it brings strength to anyone facing their own struggles with toxic relationships.